Welcome everybody, our Nature Kids families and those streaming in from all around the world. We welcome you to our interview this month with our inspirational change maker. We're introducing Mike Gaia. He is an incredible person in our view. He has this lovely garden in the background in which he's going to take you all on a tour and explain some different ways that he's incorporating this month's principle of use edges and value the marginal. Mike's going to tell you a little bit about his life, but I'm just going to throw in, he's an amazing photographer. He has a YouTube channel called Mike Gaia's Garden, which you can learn more about his property. And he's a ranger for the Skyrail, so he cares for the land up here along the edge of the Barron River and the Barron Falls. So without further ado, I'm Tennille Christensen. I've got Sammy here doing the magic tricks in and out. She's going to be asking the questions to Mike today, and let's get started.
Yeah, very excited to hear all about this. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Our Nature Kids families are in for a treat. I love that they get to see all the examples and the practicals there behind you too. So yeah, as Toddy says, let's just get straight into this. So Mike, can you share with us what you get up to for work and play? What keeps you busy during your days?
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. Hi Sammy, hi Toddy. So I'm really excited about showing you guys what I'm up to, and just to get back to your question, Sammy. So I'm Mike. I go by Mike Gaia on several social media channels, and I've got a lovely property here in Kuranda that I love very much. And so for my work, I'm a ranger for Skyrail, which is a cableway that traverses the wet tropics World Heritage Area between Smithfield, which is a suburb of Cairns, and Kuranda, a little village in the rainforest. So I'm the environment supervisor for them, meaning that I manage a team of rangers, and we are looking after the cableway in terms of trying to avoid nature interfering with the operation of the cableway. So anything natural, could be vegetation, it can also be animals. So we do a lot of rodent mitigation or snake removal, but then also a lot of vegetation management, so trimming trees and other vegetation of the towers and underneath the cableway once in a while. So the job involves a lot of work at height, in harnesses with chainsaws, sometimes in the dark. It's a very diverse role. We also tell people about the World Heritage Area as part of our tours. So that's basically when customers come on the cableway, they can join a ranger for a little tour through the forest. And I kind of enjoy the job because it's quite diverse. So no day is the same. And at the same time, Skyrail is a ecotourism operation. In fact, they've been one of the pioneers, and it makes me feel good to be able to reach out to people and increase their appreciation for natural environments. And that's probably what the job is mostly about us as rangers. Like, of course, we've got to make sure that the cableway keeps running, but really what the whole cableway is for is just to bring people into the rainforest and then to let them know how much everything is connected in nature and how much we're relying on it. And that's been my role now for about over 10 years actually, and I've been liking my job quite a bit, but at the same time I always wanted to have a little place where I can try out a few things about growing, especially tropical fruit trees, but overall I'm just a big fan of self-sufficiency and growing my own food, just because I like to eat organically grown food, and it's usually quite expensive. So I just want to know what I'm eating. And of course, no better way than just growing your food yourself. So anyway, so that's what I do professionally. And my play is basically the property now. I do also rock climb. Haven't done much of that since I've bought the place, I gotta say, because it's occupying me quite a lot. So the play's become less over the last 2 years. Or let's say the the previous play. It's been replaced by another play because I do enjoy being here in this garden and just making the place grow and just putting all these little projects in and watching them and see how they play out. So so I'm basically surrounded and immersed in growing plants and maintaining plants all my life, in my professional life just as much as in my time off.
The plant man.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing all that, Mike. I know when you were speaking then, you did touch on a few areas of why you do this. I heard you say, connecting people back to nature, and that you have love of self-sufficiency and love of growing plants. But is there anything else you'd like to share with us about why you do what you do?
Sure. So, look, I guess a really important reason for me to do this is because I do feel that our society has, even though it's quite convenient for people to go in supermarkets and buy food, it has removed us from the land, or from the understanding where food comes from and what it entails to actually grow food. And I think that's a really important thing for me, to just go back to where it all starts, to the basics. And especially because our society produces food and other goods in ways that are not very sustainable. So I'm actually trying to, at least for myself, reduce my ecological footprint. And that also means that it's not just the garden here with food, but I've got a shed that's like here at the place that I'm living here right now, that's off-grid on solar power. So all the energy of this place here comes from the sun directly. That runs my bore pump. It runs everything here. The only thing I'm not fossil fuel independent with yet is transport. And I'm hoping that in the next few years that I can afford an electric vehicle of sorts. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm really onto that because I really want to get away from fossil fuels entirely. And so that's the main motivation, I say, to just take a stance against the way the economy that produces goods, not necessarily because of need, but more because people want to make profit out of it. And so it's got probably a bit of a deeper thinking behind as well, as a critic or skeptic of the economical system that's around us, and that I'm not really very happy about, So somehow it's like I understand that I put myself in a position that I'm not totally dependent on it either.
Yep.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And it looks like you're ready to show us some examples there. That's our next question, Mike. Can you share with us how you practice our latest module that we're working on, which is use edges and value the marginal? I can see a few examples right there in the background.
Yeah, so I think the place here is full of edges everywhere. So I might actually, before I even talk about my garden, just show you the setting of the property. So I'm going to just turn the camera around. Let's just try this out.
Yep.
Okay, that worked. So,
yep.
Now you see there is actually forest in the back here. Yep. So half my place is covered in regrowth, which is, it used to be a cattle farm at some point, or part of one anyway. It's only a small block. It's only 5 acres. And then at some point they stopped grazing, and then the rainforest has come back. So that's what I've encountered when I started here. And now you see there's quite a lot of cleared area, which I actually cleared because it was covered in lantana, raspberry, and grass. So it's basically the regular succession process that took place over probably about 50 years. And the front part of the property, so this part here was probably stayed clear the longest. So there was still part of it was still pasture. There wasn't any cattle on there, but so the area that the orchard is sitting on, that was really just pasture. And at some point down here, it turned into lantana and some pioneer trees. And then in the back there, you've got quite nicely established successional, like a secondary forest. And it's mainly around the gully here. So that means I'm sitting on the edge of a forest to an open, grassy, like a paddock kind of environment.
Yep.
And now I'm trying to to turn that into a forest yet again, but with different species. Like it should be a food forest in the end.
Yep.
And so that's really the edge is part of the design here, because I'm transitioning from one ecosystem to another one, which is from a pasture to a forest type system. And the forest that I've got here, that's another interesting thing. It's full of creatures, right? Mm-hmm. And so the grassy plain, like this pasture here wouldn't have that many, but in the forest over there of course is scrub turkeys, and there's patermelons and scrub fowls and bandicoots and all these creatures, and they have discovered now how many goodies I've got growing over there. So I can tell you that the species diversity just of animals alone that have converged on my garden since I've put it in is quite incredible. Which is, I guess a good thing in parts, but it also makes it a bit tricky for me to grow things. So you will see that a lot of the trees I have to actually fence off. Mm-hmm. Like there's a durian there and so it only started, interestingly, about a year ago, that the wildlife really went nuts on all the small trees and they start breaking trees off. Mm-hmm. So that's basically what you encounter when you are working close to a forest. So when you're on the edge of a forest, and you will find that the wildlife will eventually find out that all these exotic plants are much tastier and nicer, sweeter than the native ones. But just as a little remark, but what I now try is to keep water in the landscape. And so I'm just walking you through this while I'm talking about the swales quickly. Yep. So I did find out about this concept of swales quite a long time ago, and it's intrigued me for a long time. So I thought I really have to try this out. And I've put swales onto this landscape because they, first of all, counteract erosion. And I do have a gully here. So there's a part where the water channels and then becomes faster and faster. And swales also hold water in the landscape. So you are avoiding the water from running straight through like a sheet of water, and you're basically storing the water like in dams. So that's giving you a bit of an idea anyway. So I'll put the camera back on me now. Okay, here we go. So basically the swales hold water in the landscape. And as I want to grow trees are very water hungry plants. It was a no-brainer for me to incorporate swales in the design of establishing a food forest, especially because I'm using bananas and other very water hungry plants, crops. The swales have been incredibly valuable for what I'm doing here. And I mean, you've just seen quite a bit of what's going on here. So this whole system here is 2 years old, right? And some of the jackfruits are 5 meters tall. There's one next to me here. So that thing was less than a finger thick when I put it in. And now it's got on the base, it's almost 10 centimeters thick. So, and that's, and I've also planted jackfruits away from the swales, just in the native soil. And there's no comparison. Like some of them are still the sticks that I've planted them in. So it's quite telling that the swales are having an incredible effect here. So what also happens then with the swales is you get another edge effect of two ecosystems. It's probably not the best time of the year to talk about this now because it's the dry season, but see, the swale that I'm standing in here now is empty, but it will be full of water for quite a while, almost constantly, even though it drains off periodically as well. And there's one taro that's looking nicer than the others do. That's actually a Balinese one. So can you see So this swale will fill up with water, and that then creates its own ecosystem that's more like a swampy kind of environment.
Yeah.
And now, because hasn't been any water in there for months, so I've had kangkong growing in here, but that's all died back. So you get seasonally you get opportunity to grow different plants, right?
Yeah.
So you got the swales, which are up high, and in fact they can even be quite dry because the water runs off. And that's quite beneficial for the fruit trees if you want to trigger them into flowering and fruiting. And then right next to them you have this very wet, damp environment where taro is growing, and you can still see some taros, but it's not very pretty looking right now. So they've all shrunk back and they're just dormant at the moment and waiting until the rains come back. So that's probably the largest edge effect that I've got here in my system, that I've got neighboring two ecosystems that are very, very contrasty, very different.
No, I think that was a great explanation and a lovely tour through your garden. Swales are definitely an amazing water harnessing strategy, and we're always looking to stop it and slow it and sink water into our landscapes, especially in the tropics. If it moves too fast, we end up having erosion. And it's a kind of environment where forests in the tropics want to grow. So you're doing an amazing job there. For 2 years to see all of that growth is incredible.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad it worked out, It's one of those things, I tell you what, it's when you've got ideas and you haven't got a place to realize them. It's been years in the making, to come up or like to research and look up things. So like picking bits and pieces out of permaculture, out of agroforestry, organic farming, syntropic agriculture, lots of things. And you realize, okay, well, there's some elements here that look interesting and some elements there. And as I come out of a professional background as a horticulturist, I'm sort of not someone who's fully subscribing to one or the other. So that's another thing that's playing into the edge effect that I was sort of thinking I'm going to sprinkle over the top of this conversation. That I've always been a fringe dweller or edge dweller when it comes to anything, just pick things out of particular frameworks, but not completely subscribing to all of it, just because it might not necessarily be suited for every environment or every situation. And so what you see here in the garden is just a combination of many different elements of different practices of land management.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for sharing. That's it. You just got to take what works for you. If it works for you,
yeah, that's right.
And on that, and on the wisdom and experience you've gained, what's a piece of advice that you could give to our Nature Kids Club participants on being earth carers?
The piece of advice. So, well, for the parents, of course, for the kids as well, but I'd say for the parents, definitely have a garden and keep the connection alive of where food comes from, and have kids grow up with growing their own food or even planting a tree. Like, I think the best thing, and I don't know if my dad or my mom's ever done that with me, but together when you're a little kid to plant a tree, and then, you only got to be 10 years old. And especially when you're in the tropics, like imagine how big a tree is after 10 years, right? Yeah. So to have that history of, wow, I've planted that tree when I was a little boy or a little girl, right? And to just have that is, I think, a really fundamental connection that's going to be helpful later in life to remember, because obviously people go to the cities and live in flats and buy stuff in the supermarket, but just to plant a seed in terms of a connection to, we actually, the food doesn't just come out of the supermarket. It has to get into the supermarket first, and it comes from the land. It comes from the soil. And what is the soil? And also, that the soil is not just dirt. Like a lot of people let their kids grow up in these really sterile environments, where then, of course, it breeds all sorts of allergies because kids are never exposed to any germs. But especially the soil, right? To not be scared of soil and regard it as just something dirty or talk in a negative way about it, but to realize that that's actually where everything comes from, and we will eventually return to as well. That these natural cycles of life and death, and the soil being that interface that basically connects the dead with the living, where everything that's dead is decomposed and then made available again for the stuff's alive. So this whole cycling of the nutrient flow in nature, and to have the parents make the kids understand, or get them a bit of a grasp of that, because I can really see, especially when I do my tours at Skyrail, that a lot of people have no idea of not even how a plant grows. Like, what is first, a flower or a fruit? No idea. And then it's like, wow. And you can't blame anyone. This is just the society we're living in. It's just completely ignoring all these things. But it would be nice, for the next generation to grow up with this kind of understanding. And for the kids, of course, I don't know if I can give much advice. I mean, kids enjoy playing outdoors, and I think that's another important thing. If it's not gardening, but just to enjoy the natural environments that we have. Here in Cairns, it's an easy one. Like, it's so beautiful with lots of waterfalls to explore. And I think that to keep that connection with nature alive, and not so much, taking refuge in social media and computer games and all that, which is also a thing. But I guess that's quite an important thing as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's sort of our model: less screen time and more green time. And
yeah, right.
Definitely all those things you covered, we've really encompassed in our program. So, for anyone who's not involved in the Nature Kids Club, come and join us to have access to all of this, so that, everything that Mike's sharing here is, it's something that can be integrated into our lifestyles. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. So we've got one last question. I'm sure there's many, but can you share with us one of your favorite things about nature?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too deep, but it's definitely. It's I think what I love about nature is this constant evolving of things from one thing to the next. That nothing's static, and everything's in flow. And a human lifespan it's not long enough to really understand that. Even if you live 100 years, not much evolutionary change will happen in that time. But looking back into history, in the fossil record, and to realize what the Earth looked like in the past, that we've got like 4 and whatever billion years of history and I don't know how much of it was living things, but probably most of it actually. So it was 2 or 3 billion years of living things evolving from one thing into the next. And then that process is still going. And we are, in fact, even part of it too. And that's also easy to forget. But I think that's what I like most about nature, this adaptability to anything that's thrown at it. And it's done in a way that, of course, things live and things die, and it doesn't have an agenda. It's just trying out things, and whatever works. And still, it comes up with these incredible, like the things you see, right? The diversity of different things, the incredible beauty of plants, of animals. So I think that's probably the biggest, my favorite thing of nature. Is ever changing and ever adapting and never sleeping. It's just always on the move.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, well, that wraps up today's interview. Thank you so much. It's the first tour we've done out there, and I know prior to our conversation, this interview, you were sharing the potential of us bringing the Nature Kids families out here and doing some proper workshopping in your gardens. So we look forward to that time, and actually, getting everyone's hands in the dirt and potentially making some compost and being involved in that ever-changing process. That's quite cool. So anything you want to say to put a bow on it today, Mike?
Look, I think I've probably talked enough now, but just as to reply to your last comment, that would be really wonderful. You know, I'd love to have you guys here and do workshops, and yeah, you can check out what this place has turned into, and I'm happy to facilitate anything you would like to do.
Yay!
Thank you.
All right, hear that? Anyone lucky enough to live in far north Queensland, you can
watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space. Great. Well, thank you so much, Mike. And as we say, until next time, keep playing.
Thanks, guys.